What if the people you trust most in the world are planning your worst nightmare behind your back? My name is Serafina Blackwood. I'm 28 years old, and I built a tech company worth $12 million from nothing. But none of that mattered when I heard my family discussing my future, like I was already dead. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the air change? That's what happened when I stepped into my childhood home for what I thought was my birthday celebration. The whispers stopped. Eyes darted away. My mother's fake smile stretched too wide across her face. Do you know that feeling when your gut screams danger but your brain says you're being paranoid? I should have listened to my gut. I pretended to use the bathroom, but crept toward my father's study instead. Through the crack in the door, I saw them huddled around his mahogany desk like vultures. My parents, my brother Thaddeus, even my Aunt Margaret, who I thought actually cared about me. The papers are ready. My father's voice was cold as winter steel. Dr. Morrison says the 72-hour hold can be extended indefinitely if we present the right evidence. My heart stopped beating. Papers? What papers? She's been acting erratic, my mother added, her voice dripping with fake concern. All those late nights at the office, the mood swings, talking about grandmother Eleanor again. Erratic? I was running a business. And grandmother Eleanor had been dead for 5 years, but I still missed her wisdom. My brother nodded eagerly. The commitment hearing is scheduled for Monday. By then, she'll be safely contained, and we can handle her assets properly. Assets. My company. My life's work. Have you ever felt your entire world crumble in 30 seconds? That's exactly what was happening to me, and the worst part was about to come. Because sitting right there on my father's desk, I could see official documents with my name printed across the top, and they were already signed. Growing up as Serafina Blackwood meant living under a microscope where every emotion was evidence of instability. While other kids got comfort when they cried, I got lectures about controlling my outbursts. While other families celebrated uniqueness, mine demanded perfection that matched their public image. Can you imagine being told your feelings are wrong from the age of 5? That's what shaped me into the woman sitting in that hallway, eavesdropping on my own destruction. My father, Richard Blackwood, owned 3 car dealerships and served on the city council. Image was everything. My mother, Patricia, ran charity galas and garden parties where everything had to look flawless. I was the crack in their perfect foundation. Sarah always caused problems. I remembered my mother telling neighbors when I was 12. She asks too many questions, gets too excited, cries too easily. We're working with specialists to help her. Those specialists became therapists. The therapists became psychiatrists. Every normal childhood struggle became evidence that something was fundamentally wrong with me. When I got passionate about coding and stayed up all night learning, it was obsessive behavior. When I defended myself against Thaddeus's bullying, it was aggressive tendencies. But here's what they never understood. I wasn't broken. I was different. I felt everything deeply, thought outside their narrow boxes, and refused to dim my light to make them comfortable. Do you know someone who's been told they're too much their entire life? That was me, and it nearly destroyed my self-worth. The cruel irony? While they painted me as unstable, I was building something extraordinary. My tech company specialized in mental health apps, helping people who felt as misunderstood as I once did. We'd helped over 2 million users find better emotional balance. Yet none of my success mattered to them. In their eyes, I was still the difficult daughter who needed to be controlled. And now I was discovering just how far they'd go to maintain that control. Standing in that hallway, I realized this wasn't a sudden decision. This had been planned for months, maybe years. Every family dinner where they asked about my stress levels, every concerned phone call about my work schedule, it was all data collection for this moment. But what I heard next made my blood turn to ice, because my mother was opening a folder labeled behavioral evidence, and it was thick as a phone book. Have you ever wondered what it's like to have a sibling who can do no wrong while you can do nothing right? Meet Thaddeus Blackwood, my golden child brother, who learned early that his value came from making me look worse. Thaddeus was 3 years older, and everything our parents wanted in a child. Quiet, obedient, conventional. He played football instead of coding. He dated appropriate girls instead of focusing on career goals. He never questioned authority or challenged their narrow worldview. Where I was too emotional, Thaddeus was perfectly balanced. Where I was obsessive about work, he was dedicated to family values. Every comparison was designed to prove that something was fundamentally wrong with me, while everything was fundamentally right with him. But here's what makes this story even more heartbreaking. Thaddeus wasn't naturally cruel. Our parents created this dynamic by praising him every time he helped them control me. Thaddeus, talk to your sister about her inappropriate behavior, became a weekly request. Thaddeus, keep an eye on Sarah and report back, was standard operating procedure. They turned my own brother into a spy against me. Do you have family members who've been turned against you by manipulation? The pain cuts deeper than any stranger's betrayal. When I started my company, Thaddeus asked pointed questions about my mental state, my sleep patterns, my emotional stability. I thought he cared about my well-being. Now I realize he was gathering intelligence for moments exactly like this. She's been displaying manic episodes, I heard him tell the group in Dad's study. Working 18-hour days, making grandiose plans about expanding globally, talking rapidly about changing the world through technology. Manic episodes? I was building an empire. Every successful entrepreneur puts in long hours and thinks big. But in their narrative, ambition became mental illness. Remember when she gave away $50,000 to that homeless shelter without consulting anyone? Thaddeus continued. Classic impulsive behavior associated with bipolar disorder. That donation was strategic philanthropy that improved our company's community standing and provided genuine help to people in need. But they twisted it into evidence of mental instability. The most painful part was watching Thaddeus nod along with every lie, adding his own fictional observations to strengthen their case. This wasn't just betrayal by parents. This was systematic destruction by the person who should have been my closest ally. Have you ever realized that your entire family has been working against you? Because what I discovered next proved this conspiracy went deeper than I could have imagined, and they'd been recording everything. What happens when you build a $12 million empire, but your family sees it as evidence you've lost your mind? That was my reality, and the irony was about to get so much worse. TechHeart Solutions wasn't just a business, it was my life's mission. We developed apps that helped people manage anxiety, depression, and emotional overwhelm. Our flagship product, MindBridge, connected users with licensed therapists and provided AI-powered emotional support between sessions. Can you imagine the cruel twist? While I was helping millions of people with their mental health, my own family was planning to destroy mine. Our company employed over 200 people, had offices in 4 cities, and was expanding internationally. Major hospitals used our platforms. Universities studied our success rates. The World Health Organization invited me to speak at their mental health summit. But to the Blackwood family, none of this mattered. Success wasn't proof of stability. It was proof of manic delusions of grandeur. Look at how she talks about her company. My mother's voice drifted from the study. She calls it her baby, gets emotional about user testimonials, works weekends because she can't bear to let people down. That's not normal dedication. That's obsessive attachment. Normal dedication? I was passionate about helping people because I knew what it felt like to be misunderstood, dismissed, and labeled as difficult. Every user who found peace through our apps was validation that my struggles had purpose. Do you know what it's like to have your greatest strengths turned into weaknesses? Every quality that made me successful became ammunition against me. My charitable giving became reckless spending. My late-night coding sessions became sleep disorder symptoms. My emotional investment in helping users became unhealthy boundary issues. But here's what they didn't know, and what made their plan even more sinister. TechHeart Solutions was privately held, with me as the sole owner. If I was declared mentally incompetent, legal guardianship of my assets would fall to my next of kin. My parents. Suddenly, their concern for my mental health made perfect sense. This wasn't about helping me. This was about controlling $12 million and a rapidly growing company. Have you ever realized that people who claim to love you might actually be planning to rob you? because what I heard next confirmed my worst fears and revealed they'd been meeting with lawyers for months to figure out exactly how to take everything I'd built. What's worse than discovering your family wants to steal your life? Finding out that everyone you trusted has been helping them do it. The folder in my mother's hands contained more than just family observations. It held statements from people I considered friends, colleagues I respected, even my personal assistant who I'd trusted with my most private moments. Sarah from her office provided excellent documentation, my Aunt Margaret said, shuffling through papers. All those times Sarah got passionate during meetings, raised her voice when discussing project deadlines, stayed late to perfect presentations, Sarah recorded everything as evidence of instability. Sarah had been my right hand for 3 years. I'd helped her through her divorce, paid for her mother's medical bills, treated her like family. And she'd been documenting my every emotion like a psychiatric case study. Can you imagine the betrayal of realizing your closest confidants have been building a case against you? Every vulnerable moment had been cataloged and twisted. Even her college roommate contributed. Thaddeus added proudly. Rebecca remembers how Sarah would get obsessive about projects, forget to eat when she was coding, talk for hours about changing the world through technology. Rebecca? We'd been best friends for 8 years. We'd shared everything, heartbreaks, dreams, fears about the future. I thought she understood my passion for helping people through technology. Instead, she'd painted my dedication as mental illness. The conspiracy ran deeper than family. They'd systematically contacted everyone in my life, framing their questions as concern for my well-being, while gathering ammunition for this moment. Do you have people in your life who you trust completely? Imagine discovering they've been reporting your every action to someone planning to destroy you. Her therapist from 5 years ago provided the best evidence, my father announced triumphantly. Dr. Peterson documented her emotional dysregulation, her tendency toward grandiose thinking, and her difficulty accepting authority. Dr. Peterson had helped me through grandmother Eleanor's death. I'd been grieving, angry at the world's unfairness, and yes, emotional about losing the only person who truly understood me. But healthy grief had been reframed as psychological disorder. Every therapy session where I'd been vulnerable, every moment I'd shared my deepest fears and hopes, had been turned into evidence that I couldn't manage my own life. The cruelest part? These people hadn't just betrayed me, they'd been recruited slowly, carefully, over months. Each person thought they were helping a concerned family gather information about a loved one who might need help. Have you ever been manipulated so skillfully that even your allies became weapons against you? Because what I discovered next revealed the true mastermind behind this elaborate plan, and it wasn't who I expected. The real shock was about to prove that this betrayal went back years further than I ever imagined, and it all connected to the one person I'd loved most in the world. Have you ever felt your mind crack under pressure so intense that you start questioning your own sanity? That's exactly what happened when I realized the scope of their betrayal, and for a terrifying moment, I wondered if they were right about me. Standing in that hallway, listening to my life being dissected like a lab experiment, something inside me shattered. My hands started shaking. My breathing became shallow. Panic consumed every rational thought I'd ever had. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe successful people don't work 18-hour days. Maybe normal sisters don't feel this angry about family betrayal. Maybe healthy daughters don't eavesdrop on private conversations and plot revenge against their own parents. Do you know that moment when gaslighting finally works? When years of being told you're too much suddenly feel true. I slid down the wall and sat on the cold marble floor, tears streaming down my face. Every achievement felt meaningless. Every relationship felt fake. Every emotion I'd ever trusted felt like evidence they were right. She's probably listening right now, my brother's voice carried from the study. She always was sneaky, always hiding and spying on family conversations. Even my grief was being used against me. Even this moment of complete breakdown would become more ammunition for their case. But then something shifted. Through my tears, I saw my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked broken, defeated, exactly how they wanted me to look. And suddenly, anger replaced despair. Have you ever hit rock bottom and realized it's the perfect place to build something new? because I wasn't going down without a fight. I wiped my tears and stood up. They wanted to play psychological warfare? Fine. But they'd picked the wrong daughter to mess with, and they were about to learn that underestimating Serafina Blackwood was the biggest mistake they'd ever made. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant Sarah. Hope you're having a wonderful birthday celebration with family. The fake sweetness made my stomach turn, but it also sparked an idea. If they'd been gathering evidence against me for months, then I could gather evidence against them. And tomorrow morning, I was going to find out exactly what they'd been hiding, because packed bags in the guest room meant I had less than 12 hours to save my entire life. What happens when you stop being the victim and start being the strategist? Everything changes, and that transformation began the moment I decided to fight back with the same ruthless intelligence that built my company. I crept back to my childhood bedroom and locked the door. My hands were steady now. My mind was crystal clear. Years of building a business from nothing had taught me that every problem has a solution. You just need to find the right angle. Have you ever shifted from emotional reaction to strategic thinking? It's like switching from a storm to laser focus. First, I needed information. What evidence did they actually have? What legal grounds were they claiming? Who else was involved in this conspiracy? Knowledge was power, and they'd kept me in the dark long enough. I opened my laptop and started with the basics. Involuntary psychiatric commitment laws in our state required either immediate danger to self or others, or complete inability to care for oneself. I was neither dangerous nor helpless. Quite the opposite. But they were smart. They weren't claiming I was dangerous. They were claiming I was manic, making poor decisions, and needed protection from my own success. It was harder to fight because it sounded caring rather than malicious. Do you know how manipulative people twist love into control? They were experts at it. Next, I researched Dr. Morrison, the psychiatrist they'd mentioned. His online reviews were mixed, but one pattern stood out. He specialized in helping families manage difficult adult children. Translation: he helped wealthy parents control inconvenient offspring. Then I started digging into my family's finances. If this was about money, there would be trails. My tech skills weren't just for building apps. I could trace digital footprints like a detective. What I found made my blood boil. My parents had taken out a massive loan against one of Dad's dealerships 6 months ago. They were in serious financial trouble, but they'd hidden it perfectly from the outside world. Have you ever discovered that someone's desperation was driving their cruelty? Because what came next proved they weren't just stealing my future. They were using it to save their own. My father had been secretly meeting with investment advisors about managing his daughter's assets during her recovery. Recovery from what? From being too successful for their comfort. But here's what they didn't know about me. I'd been preparing for war my entire life. Every time they dismissed my emotions, I'd gotten stronger. Every time they'd underestimated my intelligence, I'd gotten smarter. And now I was about to show them exactly what a crazy girl with $12 million and nothing left to lose could accomplish in one night. What would you do if you had 12 hours to save your entire life? I'll tell you what I did. I became a detective, a hacker, and a strategist all at once, and what I discovered changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Using my tech company's resources, I accessed databases most people don't even know exist. Background checks, financial records, legal filings, all perfectly legal when you know which services to use and have the money to pay for premium access. Have you ever gone down a research rabbit hole that revealed your whole life was a lie? That's exactly what happened to me. My parents weren't just in financial trouble, they were in criminal trouble. Dad's car dealership had been laundering money for a local crime family for 3 years. The loan they'd taken wasn't from a bank. It was from very dangerous people who didn't accept late payments. Mom's charity work wasn't just about social status. She'd been skimming donations, redirecting funds meant for homeless shelters and food banks into offshore accounts. The IRS was already investigating, but quietly. Do you know that feeling when puzzle pieces suddenly click into place? Everything made sense now. They weren't trying to help me, they were trying to use me as their escape plan. If I was declared mentally incompetent, they could become guardians of my assets and use my clean money to pay off their dirty debts. But the real bombshell came when I dug deeper into their recent communications. They'd been planning this for over a year, ever since my company's valuation hit $10 million. Every family dinner where they seemed interested in my business was actually intelligence gathering. Sarah's too smart to give us access willingly, I found in an email between my parents. But if she's officially unstable, we can save ourselves and she'll never know what hit her. Have you ever felt your heart break and your anger explode at the exact same time? Because what I found next proved this wasn't their first time destroying a family member for money. Hidden in a folder labeled Eleanor Estate, I discovered the truth about my grandmother's death. She hadn't died peacefully in a nursing home like they'd told me. She'd been committed against her will, declared mentally incompetent, and died alone while they liquidated her assets. The same Dr. Morrison who was preparing my commitment papers had signed hers 5 years ago. The same lies about erratic behavior and family concern had been used to steal her fortune. And the same pattern was playing out again, except this time I knew what they were doing. My grandmother's medical records showed she'd been perfectly healthy until the day they had her committed. Just like me, her only crime was having money they wanted and opinions they couldn't control. But here's what they didn't expect. Grandmother Eleanor had hidden something before they destroyed her life, and tomorrow I was going to use her secret to destroy theirs. Have you ever discovered that someone you loved tried to warn you from beyond the grave? That's exactly what happened when I found my grandmother's hidden message, and it changed everything about my plans for revenge. Eleanor Blackwood wasn't just my grandmother. She was my hero, my mentor, and the only person who ever truly understood me. While my parents criticized my passion, she encouraged my dreams. While they called me difficult, she called me extraordinary. Do you remember having that one person who believed in you when nobody else did? Grandmother Eleanor was that person for me, and losing her had nearly broken my heart. But now I understood why she'd always seemed worried during our last conversations. She wasn't just getting old, she was getting dangerous to people who wanted her money. Sarah, remember that families can be the most dangerous predators, she told me during our final visit. At the time, I thought she was just being dramatic. Now I realized she was giving me a warning. Hidden in her old jewelry box, which my mother had carelessly given me after the funeral, I found a letter addressed to me in grandmother's handwriting. The envelope was sealed and marked, "Open only if they try to hurt you like they hurt me." Have you ever felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature? That's what happened when I realized she'd known exactly what was coming. The letter revealed everything. How they'd gradually isolated her from friends. How they'd started questioning her financial decisions. How they'd planted seeds of doubt about her mental state with doctors, neighbors, and even me. They told you I was getting confused, didn't they? The letter read. They said I was forgetting things, making poor choices, becoming difficult to manage. None of it was true, sweetie. I was as sharp as ever. I was just inconvenient. The truth hit me like a physical blow. Every story they'd told me about grandmother's decline had been fabricated. She hadn't died from natural causes in a comfortable care facility. She died from a broken heart in a psychiatric ward, abandoned by her family and stripped of her dignity. But grandmother Eleanor had been smarter than they realized. She'd hidden evidence of their financial crimes, documented their lies, and even recorded conversations where they discussed using her money to solve their problems. Do you know what it feels like to realize your greatest loss was actually murder? Because what I found next proved they hadn't just stolen her money, they'd literally killed her spirit, and she died knowing her own family had betrayed her. The final page of her letter contained something that made my hands shake. I've hidden proof of everything they've done. Use it to save yourself and stop them from hurting anyone else. The safety deposit box key is taped under your music box. 24 hours ago, I thought I was fighting for my freedom. Now I realized I was fighting for justice for grandmother Eleanor, and tomorrow morning, I was going to make sure her killers finally paid for what they'd done. What's the difference between revenge and justice? I was about to find out, because grandmother Eleanor's evidence was so damning that I could either destroy my family or save other people from becoming their next victims. The safety deposit box contained 20 years of documentation. Financial records showing systematic theft from grandmother's accounts. Audio recordings of my parents discussing how to handle the Eleanor problem. medical records proving she'd been perfectly healthy until the day of her commitment. Have you ever held proof of someone's innocence in your hands, knowing it came too late to save them? The weight of that evidence felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried. But the most shocking discovery was a list of other families Dr. Morrison had helped over the past decade. Wealthy elderly parents declared incompetent. Successful adult children committed for being difficult. A pattern of legal theft disguised as mental health intervention. My family wasn't just criminals, they were part of a larger operation that destroyed lives for profit. And I was supposed to be their next victim. Do you know that moment when personal revenge becomes something bigger? When you realize you're not just fighting for yourself anymore. I spent the rest of the night creating a strategy that would expose everything. The financial crimes, the medical fraud, the systematic abuse of psychiatric commitment laws. Evidence that would put them in prison and save their future victims. My tech skills became weapons. I created encrypted backup copies of every document, uploaded them to secure servers, and programmed automatic releases if anything happened to me. They wanted to play with my mental health? I'd show them what a truly strategic mind could accomplish. But I also made a decision that would have made grandmother Eleanor proud. This wasn't going to be about destroying them for the sake of destruction. It was going to be about stopping a system that preyed on vulnerable people. Have you ever felt the power that comes from turning your pain into purpose? Because what I was planning would do more than save my own life. It would save every future victim they'd ever planned to target. I set up meetings with investigative journalists, prepared evidence packages for law enforcement, and created a presentation that would expose their entire operation. My birthday confrontation wasn't going to be just about family drama. It was going to be the beginning of their complete downfall and the birth of something that would honor grandmother Eleanor's memory forever. But first, I had to survive the next 24 hours because my phone was buzzing with a text from Dr. Morrison himself. Looking forward to our appointment tomorrow, Serafina. Your family is very concerned about your well-being. The trap was set, but they had no idea who was really caught inside it. What happens when you walk into your own ambush, knowing exactly what's coming? You get to watch your enemies destroy themselves while thinking they're destroying you. I arrived at my childhood home at exactly noon, wearing my best business suit and carrying a briefcase they assumed contained my resignation from sanity. Instead, it held enough evidence to put them all in prison for the rest of their lives. The living room looked like a courtroom. My parents sat behind a coffee table like judges. Thaddeus stood by the window like a bailiff. Dr. Morrison occupied the armchair like an executioner, commitment papers spread across his lap. Have you ever walked into a room where everyone thought they held your fate in their hands? The power dynamic was intoxicating. They had no idea I held theirs. Sarah, we're worried about you. My mother began with rehearsed concern. Your recent behavior has been concerning. Concerning how? I asked calmly, setting my briefcase down and taking the seat they'd positioned for me, directly in the center, surrounded by accusers. Dr. Morrison cleared his throat professionally. Your family has documented several episodes of erratic behavior. Manic work schedules, emotional outbursts, grandiose business plans, impulsive financial decisions. Do you know how it feels to hear your greatest strengths described as mental illness? But this time, instead of pain, I felt only cold satisfaction. I see. I nodded thoughtfully. And this concerns you because? Because we love you, my father said, his voice dripping with fake emotion. We can't watch you destroy yourself. The irony was beautiful. They thought they were saving me from myself, while actually saving themselves from prison. But their salvation was about to become their damnation. Before we proceed, I said, opening my briefcase, I have some questions about grandmother Eleanor's commitment 5 years ago. The room went silent. Dr. Morrison's pen stopped moving. My parents exchanged looks of pure panic. Have you ever watched someone's face change when they realize their secrets aren't secret anymore? Because what happened next was absolutely priceless. That's not relevant to your current situation, Dr. Morrison stammered. Oh, but it is, I smiled. Because I found her letter. Have you ever seen someone's entire world crumble in real time? That's exactly what happened when I pulled out Grandmother Eleanor's letter and watched my family's faces turn white with terror. Eleanor was confused at the end, my mother said quickly. She wrote many things that weren't true. Really? I opened the letter and began reading aloud. They told you I was getting confused, didn't they? They said I was forgetting things, making poor choices, becoming difficult to manage. None of it was true, sweetie. I was as sharp as ever. My father stood up abruptly. Sarah, this is exactly the kind of obsessive behavior we're concerned about. Clinging to conspiracy theories, believing. Believing what? I interrupted, pulling out the financial records. Believing that you stole $400,000 from her accounts? Believing that you forged her signature on property transfers? Believing that Dr. Morrison falsified her mental health evaluation? Dr. Morrison tried to leave. I think we should reschedule this intervention when Serafina is more stable. Do you know what happens when cornered criminals try to run? They make everything worse for themselves. Sit down, doctor, I said firmly. We're just getting started. I pulled out the audio recordings. Would you like to hear my parents discussing how to handle the Eleanor problem? Or maybe the recording where you promised to keep her sedated until the estate transfer was complete? The room fell silent except for the sound of my mother crying. But these weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone whose scam had been exposed. You killed her, I said simply. Maybe not with poison or a gun, but you killed her spirit, her dignity, and her will to live. She died alone in that psychiatric ward, knowing her own family had betrayed her for money. Thaddeus finally spoke, his voice shaking. Sarah, we never meant. We were desperate. Dad owed dangerous people. We thought Eleanor would understand. Have you ever heard someone justify murder with financial problems? Because that's exactly what my brother just did. Understand? I laughed bitterly. She understood perfectly. That's why she hid evidence of everything you did. Bank records, medical files, recorded conversations, witness statements. 20 years of documentation proving you're not just thieves, you're predators who destroy your own family for profit. I pulled out the final folder. But here's what really makes this interesting. You're not just guilty of what you did to Eleanor. You're part of Dr. Morrison's operation that's been targeting wealthy families across 3 states. Dr. Morrison stood up again. I'm leaving. This woman is clearly having a psychotic episode. Leave if you want, I said calmly. The FBI agents outside will be happy to discuss your patient list with you. That stopped him cold. Through the window, we could all see the black SUVs pulling into the driveway, and suddenly everyone in that room realized the trap had been sprung, but not on me. What does desperation look like when it's wearing the faces of people who raised you? I was about to find out because my family's perfect masks were finally slipping off. You called the FBI? My father whispered, his face turning gray. On your own family? You tried to have me committed to steal my money, I replied evenly. After murdering my grandmother for hers. What did you expect? A thank you card? Dr. Morrison was frantically stuffing papers into his briefcase, but we could all hear car doors slamming outside. There was nowhere to run now. Have you ever watched someone realize their life is over? It's both satisfying and heartbreaking, even when they deserve it. We can work this out, my mother pleaded, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Family handles things privately. We don't air our problems to strangers. Eleanor was family too, I said coldly. That didn't stop you from destroying her. Thaddeus suddenly broke down completely. I never wanted this, he sobbed. They made me lie about you, made me spy on you, made me choose between helping them or losing them completely. I was trapped just like you. Do you know the difference between someone who's truly sorry and someone who's just sorry they got caught? My brother's tears felt genuine, but they were 5 years too late. You had choices, I told him. Every time you reported my concerning behavior to them, every time you added lies to their evidence file, every time you nodded along with their plan to destroy me, those were choices. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see federal agents in bulletproof vests. This was really happening. What do you want? My father asked desperately. Money? We'll give you everything back. Control of the dealerships? They're yours. Just call off the FBI. Have you ever had someone offer to give you back what was already yours? The absurdity was almost funny. I don't want your dirty money, I said. I want justice for Eleanor. I want protection for future victims. And I want the truth about what you've all done. Dr. Morrison made one last desperate play. Nobody will believe her, he announced. She's clearly having a manic episode, making paranoid accusations against her loving family. This is exactly why she needs professional help. But as the FBI agents entered the house with search warrants, I realized something beautiful was happening. For the first time in my life, my family couldn't control the narrative. The evidence spoke for itself. Agent Sarah Chin introduced herself and looked directly at Dr. Morrison. Doctor, we have some questions about your patient commitment practices and financial relationships with the Blackwood family. The look of terror on his face was worth 28 years of being called crazy. Because the real crazy ones were finally about to face consequences, and my brother was about to make a choice that would shock everyone in that room. Have you ever witnessed someone choose redemption over self-preservation? That's exactly what happened when Thaddeus made the most important decision of his life. I want to confess, my brother announced suddenly, shocking everyone in the room. I want to tell the truth about everything we did to Eleanor and everything we plan to do to Sarah. Agent Chin pulled out her recording device. Are you sure about this, Mr. Blackwood? You have the right to an attorney. I've had the right to be a decent person my entire life, Thaddeus said, looking directly at me. I chose wrong every single time. I'm not making that mistake again. My parents looked horrified. Dr. Morrison turned pale. But I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope that my brother might actually have a soul left to save. Do you believe people can change, even after years of choosing wrong? Because what Thaddeus did next proved that sometimes shame can transform into courage. He detailed everything. The systematic isolation of grandmother Eleanor. The forged documents. The bribes to Dr. Morrison. The plan to commit me and steal my assets. The money laundering operation. Names, dates, bank account numbers, he gave them everything. Why? Agent Chin asked. Why help your family commit these crimes? Thaddeus looked at our parents with disgust. Because they convinced me that family loyalty meant protecting them from consequences. They taught me that success meant doing whatever it takes to win. They made me believe that Sarah and Eleanor were obstacles to our survival. Have you ever heard someone take full responsibility for their choices while explaining how they were manipulated into making them? It was both accountability and revelation. But they weren't obstacles, he continued. They were the best people in our family, and we destroyed them because they threatened our lives. My mother tried one last manipulation. Thaddeus, you're making a terrible mistake. Think about your future, your reputation, My future, he laughed bitterly. You destroyed my future the day you taught me that money was more important than truth. That image was more important than integrity. That family meant protecting criminals instead of protecting innocent people. Dr. Morrison was arrested first, his briefcase full of forged commitment papers serving as evidence. Then my parents, their faces showing shock that their golden child had betrayed them. But as I watched them being led away in handcuffs, I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected. Instead, I felt something deeper, the weight of responsibility for what came next. Have you ever won a battle but realized the war was bigger than you imagined? Because saving myself was just the beginning. Now I had to decide what to do with the power I'd gained and the platform I'd earned. The FBI investigation would expose Dr. Morrison's entire network. Dozens of families would get justice. Millions of dollars would be returned to victims' estates. But the real victory would be something else entirely, and it would honor grandmother Eleanor in a way that pure revenge never could. What happens when you transform your greatest pain into your most powerful purpose? You discover that healing isn't just personal, it becomes a gift you can give to the world. 6 months after the FBI arrested my family, I stood in the conference room of the Eleanor Blackwood Foundation for Family Justice. The walls were covered with photos of elderly people who'd been exploited, adult children who'd been silenced, and families who were finally healing after generations of abuse. My company, Tech Heart Solutions, had partnered with legal advocacy groups to create a nationwide network that protected vulnerable family members from predatory relatives. We'd helped over 300 families escape situations similar to mine. Have you ever found a way to turn your worst experience into someone else's salvation? That transformation became my life's greatest achievement. Thaddeus sat across from me at the conference table. He'd served 8 months in minimum security prison, lost everything he'd built on lies, but gained something more valuable, his integrity. Now he worked as a counselor helping other family members break free from toxic dynamics. Eleanor would be proud, he said, looking at the Foundation's first annual report. We've prevented 42 illegal commitments, recovered $12 million in stolen assets, and helped shut down 3 fraudulent psychiatric practices. Do you know what forgiveness actually looks like? It's not forgetting what someone did. It's working together to make sure it never happens to anyone else. My parents were serving 15-year sentences for fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. Dr. Morrison got 25 years for his role in the broader conspiracy. Justice had been served, but justice without healing is just organized revenge. The real victory was more personal. I'd learned to trust my instincts again. I'd built relationships based on honesty instead of fear. I discovered that being difficult meant being strong, that being emotional meant being human, and that being too much meant being exactly enough. But the most important lesson came from Grandmother Eleanor's final letter, the part I'd never shared with anyone else. Don't let their betrayal make you afraid to love again. The world needs people who feel deeply, dream boldly, and refuse to be silenced. Promise me you'll use your gifts to protect others like us. Have you ever made a promise that changed not just your life, but the lives of everyone you touch going forward? Because that's exactly what happened when I decided to honor her memory through action instead of anger. Today, the Eleanor Blackwood Foundation operates in 12 states. We've trained therapists to recognize family manipulation patterns. We've helped lawmakers strengthen protections against psychiatric abuse. We've given voice to people who were told they were too broken to be believed. My story didn't end with revenge. It began with justice and grew into healing. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't destroy your enemies. Sometimes it's transform your pain into protection for others, your trauma into triumph, and your survival into service. That's what real strength looks like. That's what Grandmother Eleanor taught me. And that's the gift I'll spend the rest of my life giving to anyone who needs to know they're not crazy. They're just surrounded by people who profit from making them feel that way.